General. The man's voice cut through the solemn air of the training ground, halting abruptly. Sir, everything in me froze in a single breath. Every gaze turned toward me as if noticing my existence for the first time, after years of being treated like air. But that wasn't where I began to disappear. It started in the very house where I grew up, a place that now I could no longer call home. My name is Elena Hart, and you might hear some call me the Quitter. I was once the pride of my family, until the day I became something they no longer expected. If you've ever felt lost in your own family, sat silently through a crowded dinner where no one asked you a word, perhaps you'll understand me. And if you're reading this, I hope you'll leave a single word, heard, or share what moment made you feel like a shadow in your own home. I'm not telling this story because I need pity, but because I know someone out there needs to hear it. Spokane, Washington. 6:42 p.m. The sky was turning to autumn, dry and thin. I drove down the familiar gravel road where I'd learned to ride a bike at 8, falling and scraping my knees until they bled. The old white-painted house emerged from behind the row of pines, same sloped roof, same wooden porch, slightly warped by time, same flickering porch light that never got fixed. On my phone screen, a single text from my mother, "Come home. Don't dress weird. Madison's promotion party. No. We miss you. No, I want to see you." Just an order, as if I were still the 17-year-old washing dishes after dinner, not someone who'd been through wars they never knew about. I wore a gray shirt, black jeans, clean loafers. No uniform, no rank. Not a single sign of who I was, and they seemed to prefer it that way. Just normal enough not to ruin the family party. Inside the house was bright and stifling. A long table draped in red cloth, fresh flowers in the center, and along the walls photos of Madison at her swearing in at boot camp receiving medals. A banner hung in one corner, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Madison Hart." Amid the clinking wine glasses, laughter, and the rich smell of grilled meat, there was a silence reserved just for me, a deliberate oblivion. No one stood when I walked in. No one turned. There wasn't even a seat for me. I slipped to the back kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, like a well-mannered ghost. My father was the first to speak, but not to greet me. "Elena, what have you been up to?" No eye contact. No pause. The question came out like polite habit. I pressed my lips together, but before I could answer, he turned to boast about Madison's top tactical scores in her battalion. "It's fine. I was used to it." My cousin Kelsey winked. "You used to pretend to be a waitress when we were kids. Look at you now, all professional." A sharp laugh followed. I smiled politely. "I'm a better actor now." The words didn't cut skin, but they left a cold ache in my bones. When everyone raised glasses to toast Madison, I was asked to fetch more water and extra plates. No one asked if I was eating or wanted to say anything. I went as if I weren't even there. Memories flooded back 10 years ago, in this same kitchen, tears falling inward as my father called me the family's first failure. I didn't argue. I just left. 3 weeks later, I enlisted under a different name. I returned to the dining room. Still no seat for me. Every chair had a name card. None said Elena. My mother looked up, her eyes distant as if I were a stranger passing through. "Oh, sit on the porch. There's a folding chair out there." I went to the porch, sat on the cold chair next to the grill's propane tank. Through the glass door, I saw Madison laugh. Her eyes met mine for a moment, not with hatred, not with pity, just confusion. As if for the first time she didn't know who she was looking at. Then it buzzed, the signal I always kept close, even at family dinners. A coded device, thin as a wallet, vibrating faintly. Its black screen flashed white text, observer mode activated. Fort Irwin. Directive, immediate. Training, observation, top secret. I smiled. For the first time that evening, a real smile. In this house, I was invisible. But out there, I was the eye the enemy never knew was watching. If you've ever lived in a place that no longer feels like home, been treated as if you're not important enough for a seat at the table, you're not alone. Leave a message. Who have you stayed silent for? "Are you sure you want to disappear?" the woman in front of me asked without looking away from her screen. No uniform, no name tag, just a thin gray coat and a voice cold as metal. I nodded. No hesitation. No request for time to think. "Good," she said. "From now on, you're no longer Elena Hart." Years later, sitting in the house where I grew, Opengle watching people who shared my blood but didn't truly see me. I realized I'd started disappearing long before I left. If you've ever felt that way, existed as if you were a burden, no one wanted to name you're not alone. Leave a line in old memory. I read every word because we only truly vanish when no one remembers we were ever there. I left the Colorado Military Academy in the early spring of that year. Not because of bad grades, not because of a violation. I just broke. No one really saw it. Not my instructors, not my teammates, not my family. I disappeared from the system like a line of code erased from the mainframe. When I got home, I thought my mother would ask, "What happened?" I thought my father would say, "Are you okay?" Instead, at the first dinner back, my father looked at me and declared like a judge, "This family doesn't fail, but you're the exception." No one disagreed. Madison 16 then looked at me with a mix of admiration and fear, as if I were a living example of what not to become. 3 weeks later, I left again. But this time, no one knew I wouldn't come back. I was recruited into Shadow It, through a back door, one of those Black Ops intelligence programs most people will never hear of. No ceremony, no name tags, just a classified document, 3 witnesses, and 1 choice. Either you disappear, or you become the shadow of things that aren't supposed to happen. I signed, easily. The first week we weren't called by names, we were codes. I was K-13, Alpha Unit Southwest. My teammates came from everywhere, a discharged sniper, a hacker from the Naval Academy, a former interpreter from the Syrian border. No one asked about each other's pasts. No one was allowed to carry anything with their name on it. I remember the first training session in the New Mexico desert. The wind was hot as a blade. The shooting range was hidden behind a rocky ridge. We had to move for 72 hours without rest, with a deliberately flawed map and water barely enough for one. We learned to vanish without a trace. 3 months later, I was no longer recognizable in the mirror. I mastered military-grade encryption. I learned to mimic Eastern European accents, move without sound, and erase someone's records with a string of commands. But in return, I started forgetting my own voice. Not because I didn't speak, but because no one needed to hear it. And when no one needs to hear you, you start believing nothing you say matters. One mission I'll never forget was at the Baltic border, a relay station we were ordered to destroy and withdraw from. But when I got there, I saw a child sleeping in the corner, matted hair, dirty face, no name, no papers. I reported it, waited for orders. The response from command, no secondary targets confirmed. Execute. I cut the comms. I took the child away, leaving behind everything the system deemed rational. After that, I wasn't called for missions for months. I thought they'd discharge me. Instead, I was moved to covert strategy, where those technically unreliable were best suited to plan things the government didn't want tied to law. I learned to operate outside every system. I was trained to manipulate the game without being seen. And one day, when a major operation failed due to a commander's error, I was chosen to handle the silent cleanup. No glory, no thanks. Just a file erased at the right moment, and a survivor no one knew the name of. Do I regret it? I'm not sure. Some nights I lay in windowless hotel rooms, wondering if Madison still remembers I liked orange marmalade in my pancake batter, or if my father ever thought to text, "Are you okay?" But then I realized I didn't choose this path to hide. I chose it because silence is sometimes the only way the right things survive. I have no medals, no public rank. But when the alarm sounds at Fort Irwin and the system calls for H-01, I know I still exist even without a name. General one word, a gravelly voice like stones scraping steel. The training field fell silent. Footsteps stopped as if sliced by a knife. I didn't move, didn't respond. "General, sir." I turned and saw Drill Sergeant Jason Bruckner, a living legend at Fort Irwin, standing at attention, his right hand raised in a perfect military salute. If there was one moment that shifted every balance, this was it. And if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, then one day someone had to acknowledge your true worth. I believe you'd understand how I felt when my sister Madison Hart stood among the ranks and dropped her rifle. If you've ever had a moment where you silenced someone who belittled you, not with words but with actions, leave a comment. I don't need to prove, I just need them to see. I arrived at Fort Irwin in the early morning, the sky a pale blue like faded notebook paper. I wore semi-civilian attire, a high-collared black jacket, dark gray tactical pants, tinted sunglasses. No insignia, no name tag. Just an observer's badge on my chest one only 3 people on the base could decode. I didn't come to be seen. I came to watch. The training field was west of the barracks, where desert winds swept through rows of containers arranged as obstacles. Dust rose from soldiers' boots like a miniature battlefield haze. On the field, Madison stood in formation caucus, rifle in hand, eyes focused, face cold as if commanding a heroic contempt. I sat in the observer's row, third tier, between a pair of civilian technicians and a tired admiral fitting for a handbook. No one knew who I was, and I liked it. Drill Sergeant Bruckner appeared like a quiet explosion. His voice boomed like thunder over dry stone. Left flank, spread out. Right flank, focus. I remembered him not because he trained me, but because he once refused a promotion to stay out of politics. One of the few I trusted, and the only one on the field who knew who I was. When his eyes scanned the spectator rows, I saw it. He recognized me instantly. And then he stopped. The entire base fell into a beat of silence. He walked toward me, not rushed, not slow, each step heavy as a marching drum. When he reached me, he stood at attention, saluted, and said loudly, clearly, "General Hart, sir." An unmistakable salute. Madison dropped her rifle. The sound of metal hitting the ground was like a mini explosion in the dead silence. I saw her look at me. Her mouth parted as if to speak, then froze. She didn't know what to call me. Didn't know what I'd become. And above all, she didn't know how much she'd missed. I stood, not returning the salute. Just said in a low voice, just loud enough I'm only observing Sergeant, "Keep it quiet." Bruckner nodded. No argument. No explanation to anyone. He turned away as if nothing had changed, but I knew everything had. The rest of the training passed in tense air. I saw the sidelong glances, the eyes flicking toward me between shouted cadences and formation adjustments. Though I said nothing more, though I sat still as a shadow, I'd become the center of attention. And that center wasn't because I said I'm a general. It was because someone once nameless now had someone else call them by a rank they'd never dared imagine. The training ended. I stood before anyone could approach. Bruckner came over again. This time no ceremony. Just an old comrade's brief talk. "This unit, they don't know anything." I nodded. "Keep it that way. We both know why." He nodded back. We didn't need many words. Those who've lived in the shadows don't need explanations to understand each other. As I left the field, I saw Madison still standing there. Rifle in hand, her eyes didn't meet mine, but didn't leave me either. Not a look of blame. Not admiration. Just confusion. As if she were trying to piece together 2 memories that didn't fit: the sister who dropped out, who my father called a disgrace, and the one a hardened sergeant just saluted. I exited through the side gate. No one called my name. I didn't need them to. I'd had enough. That afternoon I sat in a temporary room in the high command quarters. No nameplate, no lodging record, no uniform. Just me, an encrypted laptop, and a new message from headquarters system, detected unauthorized high-level access. Device suspected linked to Phoenix Protocol data. Phoenix Protocol. A program I'd helped build, then personally shut down forever. Only 2 people knew it existed, and no one but me had access. So why did the system log a device accessing it at Fort Irwin? I froze. Then a thought hit me like blood spreading on dry sand. Someone had touched something I'd left behind, and that someone could only be Madison. Have you ever kept a secret so long you forgot others might stumble upon it? If you've ever buried something to protect someone only for it to come back for you, leave a comment. Not everyone should know the truth, but sometimes they find it anyway. Every door I locked in my past was sealed for a reason. But what I didn't expect was someone accidentally finding the key. And worse, that someone was the person I'd hoped could live without knowing the truth. A year ago, I gave Madison a worn, silver-gray duffel bag, faded, frayed at the corners, seemingly worthless. I said, use it for the gym, or to store dirty socks. Madison didn't ask questions. She nodded and stuffed it in her dorm closet. I'd hoped that was enough. Enough to let the past sleep. Enough for Madison to live a proper military life, no shadows, no codes, no blood, no stories I'd never tell. I was wrong. That day after the tense training session, Madison returned to her dorm earlier than usual. Maybe because of my look on the field. Maybe because of Bruckner's salute. Maybe deep down she knew she no longer understood the sister once called the quitter. Madison didn't mean to uncover a secret. She was just doing what any of us might, trying to find a piece of someone she hadn't had time to ask about in the past. She pulled the duffel from under her bed, unzipped it, flipped the lining at the bottom, and when her fingers brushed a carefully cut seam, she found it a device small as an ID card, matte black, no buttons. No logo, but with a faint green glow when activated. A Shadowette protocol. Token, one of the oldest access keys still in existence. A name never mentioned in any military academy lecture. Never in training manuals. Non-existent on paper. Madison turned the device in her hand, then plugged it into her tablet's auxiliary port. She thought it might hold old data. Photos, maybe a journal or assignments. She didn't know that one light touch sent a level 3 encrypted signal activating an automated protocol I'd written a decade ago. Her tablet flickered. A code ran. The screen went black. Then text appeared. Restricted clearance. Shadowette node. H01. Attempting handshake. Connection unstable. Stand by. Madison sat up, yanked the device out. The screen returned to normal. No warnings. No errors. Just silence. But what she didn't know was that the device didn't work like normal ones. It didn't need to complete a login to flag an unauthorized access. Activation was enough. At the same moment in the security coordination hub east of the barracks, the central system picked up an anomalous signal string. A deleted ID active again. Codename H01, me. An internal alert triggered. No sirens. No red lights. Just lines of code running silently logging into the system. An invisible fuse had been lit. I knew moments later when my personal comm device buzzed twice a distinct warning. I was in my room, coffee still steaming dim light reflecting off frosted glass. I opened the device. My eyes scanned the alert attempted access to Shadowette node H01. Origin internal base network. Source Fort Irwin. I didn't blink, didn't panic. Just felt a slow cold creep down my spine. I stood, walked to the safe, opened the mechanical lock, and pulled out the base's internal network map, every connection point, every auxiliary line. The access originated from the women's dorm second floor room 12B, Madison's room. There are moments when the past you've buried with all your strength rises from the grave just because someone opened the wrong drawer. I took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to wipe the logs clean it as if nothing happened. But the part that had lived in the dark for 10 years knew the system didn't allow that. It would auto-report to Central. An investigation would start, and Madison would become a suspect. Have you ever done something harmless only to realize you'd opened a door that couldn't be closed? I once touched something I shouldn't have, if you've had a moment like that. I'm not writing this to judge, but to remind you some fuses make no sound until you're standing at the heart of the blast. Madison didn't know. She didn't know she'd touched a code dormant for nearly a decade designed to lock away a history no one dared reopen. She didn't know people had died to keep it buried. And now, because of one careless move, it was no longer buried. I opened an old, secure interface. The password still worked. I accessed the internal investigations tracking process and saw my name flickering on the watch list, H01. Ghost ID reactivated pending review. No official report had reached command yet. No one in the base had been summoned, but the clock was ticking. I had two choices: sit back and let Madison face the consequences as the system demanded, or step in break protocol and put myself under scrutiny. I knew which I'd choose, and I also knew, when you choose mercy, you accept you can't escape the fallout. I thought I'd learned to control everything: memories, fear, even tears. But that night, a single thin letter made me cry for the first time in nearly a decade. Not because of what it said, but because of who wrote it and how long they'd stayed silent. My temporary room at Fort Irwin was at the end of the hall top floor of the Strategic Command Wing. No name on the door, no cleaning staff. Just a hard bed, a desk, a flickering corner lamp, and a locked safe holding pieces of a past I thought I'd sealed tight. I returned near 22:00, after meeting Bruckner, after submitting a report taking blame to protect Madison. A hollow feeling lingered, like I'd traded my life for someone else's temporary peace. I opened the door, and the first thing I saw was an envelope on the desk. No seal, no stamp, No address. Just a sheet of paper folded twice, lightly yellowed with slightly shaky ink. But I knew it instantly. I recognized the handwriting. My mother's. I stood frozen for seconds, the surreal feeling like someone had knocked on memory's door and run away. I sat, opened the letter. The first line stole my breath. Elena. Not dear daughter, not sweetie. Just Elena, but the first time I'd seen my name written by hand in over 10 years. I don't know how to start, so I won't try to make it sound nice. I don't understand you. I thought I did, that you were strong, disciplined, the eldest who'd set an example for Madison. But then you dropped out, and I couldn't accept it. I didn't ask why. I just got angry, and I thought if I stayed silent, you'd come back to apologize. I paused, my hand gripping the paper's edge. My throat was dry as the desert. But that month, your father found a strange article, no author, about an anonymous officer commended for refusing a wrong order in Eastern Europe. No photo, no clear details, but he quietly cut it out, tucked it into his old technical notebook. I asked, "Why keep this?" And he just said, "I think it's her." My tears spilled sudden as a summer rain on desert sand. I didn't believe it. I didn't want to, because if it was true, I'd been silent for years while you were fighting alone, in places no one in the family knew about or took pride in. But a second article appeared, then a third, and each time your father kept them. I read them quietly. No one spoke, but in my heart, I knew. I took a deep breath, but it wasn't enough to stop the sob rising in my chest. Some things you think are dead inside you until a line like that brings them back to life. Enduring silence is something I never taught you, but you lived it for years. I don't know what you've done, and I know you'll never tell, but I'm grateful you're still alive. I'm not good at saying how I feel, but you need to know someone still watches what you do even from afar. And every time Madison talks about a special tactic she learned, or a training she found too harsh, I wonder, did Elena teach that? I wiped my tears, but new ones fell. Not because my mother apologized she didn't, but because she saw me without ever asking me a question. There are loves that go unspoken. They don't form words, aren't written on walls, aren't baked into birthday cakes. They exist in someone clipping nameless articles and keeping them in an old notebook. If you're reading this, it means the courier did what I asked. Don't ask who. Just know I've always been watching. And though I don't understand you, I still love you in my own way. Mom. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, eyes closed. And in that silence, I was no longer General Hart. Not K-13. Not Shadowitz operative. Just Elena, 28. The eldest daughter who once felt like a burden. Have you ever held a small memory? A sign someone loved you, though they never said it? Share if you want. I was loved in silence. Because sometimes the things we don't hear are what keep us standing. I tucked the letter into my jacket close to my heart, and then the encrypted device buzzed, an urgent signal. I opened the screen. Malware detected in Shadowit access logs. Foreign code manually embedded 5 years ago. Suspected source, Croft N. Insider encryption. Croft. He didn't just leave a trace. He planted a sleeper virus, a code that could collapse the system if accessed. And Madison, the innocent one, had just triggered it. I clenched my fist, wiped my tears. My mother's love softened me. But what I had to do next would be harder than any war I'd ever fought. The secure data room at Fort Irwin was in the second basement, buried under electromagnetic-resistant concrete and 2 layers of physical encryption. Only High Command had full access, but I still held a temporary key verified by Bruckner through old Candor protocols. I entered at 2312 after the malware alert from Madison's device. No excess lights, just screens blinking codes and data breathing with the pulse of a reawakened nightmare. I reopened the Shadowit node access logs. The trace wasn't clear, but enough to pull a hidden string of markers buried in auxiliary response packets. The final line froze me for seconds. Tag N, Croft Alt, Ghost Node, C17, Croft. He'd been here. Not physically, but as the echo of a virus planted in the system. Each line of his code was like a silent tooth mark in the data. I knew this signature. I'd cleaned it up once in a mission no one wanted to remember. Have you ever felt someone from your past, long gone, still influencing your present? If so, leave a line, "I know the weight of old ghosts." Because sometimes the scariest enemy isn't the one in front of you, but the one who once stood beside you, then turned to the dark. I opened an old internal file stored only in auxiliary archives, unlinked from new systems. I had to trace it manually, by hand, by eye, by the instinct of someone who'd lived through command's errors. Full name Nathaniel Croft, former Colonel Commander of Eastern Outpost 1 who could have been a general if not for the incident at Candor. That incident was because of me. We'd worked together. I was under his command, but with independent tactical analysis rights. One mission Eastern Europe border. A small civilian village suspected of aiding rebels. Intel sent vague signals. Unverified. Croft didn't need verification. He needed a reason. His order: clear the area. No post-action report. I refused. I sent a counter-signal to Central, recorded the entire exchange, preserved raw radar data. 3 days later, Croft was reassigned. No trial, no court-martial. He vanished as if he'd never existed. But I knew he saw it as betrayal. I sat at the screen, hands trembling slightly as I traced the code. It wasn't random. It was embedded in the code I'd written, meaning Croft had accessed the system when I was still part of it. And he left a digital mine. Not to detonate instantly. To activate only when someone by chance used the right device, right code, right place. And that someone was Madison. He didn't want to destroy the system. He didn't need to cause base-wide chaos. He just needed one thing: for me to be flagged as the source of an internal breach, and from there investigated as a level 1 threat treason. I saw the plan clearly. A perfect scheme set years ago. No need for accomplices. Just patience. Croft calculated I'd keep the device, that I'd give it to someone, and that I'd cover for them if they made a mistake. He didn't just target my mind. He targeted my instinct to protect. Have you ever had someone use your kindness against you, right? I was hurt by my own compassion. Because it's real when you live for others, there are more paths for others to exploit. I downloaded the logs, shut the system, locked all access with my personal code. Then I sent a short code to Bruckner. No message, just signal 140, an old player's back. 3 minutes later he appeared in the hallway. No words. Just followed me to a temporary meeting room. Croft, I said. He didn't vanish. He's close. Proof, yes. His personal code, his signature. And the way the code's embedded, it's his. Bruckner sighed. He's not crazy enough to walk into the base. I looked him in the eye. He doesn't need to. He just needs to be close enough to control remotely. Where do you think he is outside the base fence civilian area? Maybe under an alias, contractor consultant or civilian tech. I knew tracing Croft meant reopening his file marked sealed no further action by the Pentagon. If I dug, I'd be in the crosshairs. Not just Croft's, but those who wanted the past to stay buried. But I had no way back. Madison was involved. I'd taken the fall for her. And now, if I didn't end this, she'd be the next victim as I once was. I stood in the gray hallway of the defense base top floor of Block A. LED lights bore down on my partly grayed hair, gray from what they call loyalty. The metal door shut behind me with a heavy thunk. Madison had just been summoned. Reason suspected unauthorized access to defense data systems, causing a severe security breach. I knew instantly this wasn't an investigation. It was a sacrificial selection. And my sister Madison was the chosen one. Madison was led into the interrogation room via the old route. The report on the screen read, "Possible establishment of device destruction protocol." They wanted someone to blame. Someone had to answer. I'd locked the system. I'd erased traces. I'd blocked Croft with my own hands. But in the military's machinery, no one wanted silence. Have you ever faced a choice: stay silent to protect someone, or speak the truth and regret it? Leave below, I chose silence. I admired how Madison faced it head on. She didn't cry, didn't apologize. She was ready to face the gallows, yet stood tall. I stepped in. Hold on. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped the room's air. A colonel turned. General Hart, this is an internal investigation. All relevant ranks have additional information. I read a prepared statement. I admitted I hadn't followed standard device destruction protocols, that I'd kept the device as a backup training tool, but forgot to report it. The entire breach stemmed from that. Madison stared at me, stunned. I didn't look back. Days later, the decision came insufficient grounds for prosecution. Madison's investigation was officially closed. As for me, a short email reminder, General Hart, please review personal data retention protocols. A smudge on my record. And I accepted it. People often ask, is mercy weakness or strength? When do you stay silent and when do you speak? Share what you believe below. Madison came to me that night. No uniform, her face blank, carrying something she didn't yet have words for. Why? Did you do that? I stayed silent. Then just said, because I'm still alive to remember you didn't leave me behind once. She looked at me, nodded. In that moment, I knew she was changing. And as I predicted, Croft didn't stay quiet long. By night, malware packets began spreading through the backup system. To take down someone who hides well, sometimes you have to become the darkness. I whispered this to Bruckner as we entered Fort Irwin's tactical room. The light was just enough for the screens to glow with data's full intensity. Lines of code danced sharp as surgical cuts. The fight with Croft was no longer personal. It was about honor ethics and the right to live free from the past's pursuit. We built a fake data model, a bait, crafted from Croft's own code patterns. Madison suggested the exact interface he'd recognize a control panel mimicking the Candor mission's system, with small flaws to make him feel in control. He won't resist a chance to fix his past by twisting the truth again, I said. We've got one shot, Bruckner growled. If he suspects, he'll vanish. Like last time. Madison hesitated. Are you sure he'll bite? I nodded. No one drunk on power resists a chance for revenge. The interface was planted in the auxiliary system, fully isolated from the main network. It had reverse feedback code. Any unauthorized access would be traced and logged. The bait was set at 0243. We disabled all alerts and waited. No words, no coffee. Just the mechanical clock ticking like a heartbeat. 0258. A small signal appeared in the screen's corner. Identifier NC Alt V4. The signal came from a civilian housing block south of Fort Irwin, the tactical simulation support area, where Croft worked as a civilian tech consultant. He's hooked, Madison whispered. Not yet, I said. He'll test it. Wait for the secondary routing signal. 3 minutes later, as predicted, Croft tried a data bridge, sending a fake authentication packet. At that moment, the auto-response code logged his coordinates device, data structure, and, crucially, his movements. I hit the trap's lock button. Croft was cut off, not soon enough for him to trace the bait. 04:12 a.m. The internal task force, led by Bruckner, raided the suspected house. No gunfire, no smoke. But the man they caught stood calmly by the server, as if he knew it was coming. Croft looked at me as I walked in. Same eyes, calm, probing, mixed with disdain and arrogance. I wondered how long it'd take you to find me, he said. I thought you'd be slower. I didn't respond. Just placed the extracted data packet from the bait system on the table. You still think conscience keeps people alive? Croft laughed. I survived because I stopped believing in it. I leaned in, whispered near his ear. The forgotten can't trigger a kill switch, but someone with a conscience can rewrite the game. He stopped laughing. When Croft was led away, Madison stepped closer. Her eyes were no longer the angry ones from when I entered the base. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen truth unshackled. When did you know he was here? She asked. From the moment you activated the device, I replied. Every signal from my old device was bait, and the trap was set 5 years ago, just waiting for someone cocky enough to return. Madison nodded. Thank you for not telling anyone I messed up the system. I looked at her. I didn't just protect you. I protected the right choice. And sometimes you trade reputation to keep it. Have you ever forgiven someone through actions, not words? Leave a line I chose to protect, even if they didn't know. Because sometimes the greatest forgiveness is what we do quietly, when others no longer expect us to do anything for them. Croft was escorted to a high-level base for interagency investigation, but I knew the real battle wasn't over. In his pocket, we found a secondary drive containing unactivated code. In it, the name Candor appeared again, and a sub-branch labeled C17 Ghost Relay. It led to something I thought was erased, the last backup server of the Candor operation. If Croft had planted a double code, the second part of his plan might still be active. In war, truth often doesn't survive, but if one person lives to tell it, it's not dead yet. The hearing took place in a military courtroom deep in the Defense Department's secure level. No TV lights, no waving flags, just hardwood cold metal and an air so thick even the calmest clenched their fists. I wasn't on the defendant's side, but some looks made it clear I still had to prove myself. Because the accusation came from Nathan Croft, a man who once wore stars and wielded power equal to any general in his prime, he didn't just want personal revenge, he wanted to bury the last of my reputation. Croft took the stand with a half smile and a stack of documents. "I'm not here to clear my name," he said, like a professor lecturing. "I'm here for transparency." During the candor operation, there was a period of lost contact. In that time, Colonel Elena Hart failed to report civilian casualties. I looked at him, didn't blink. She chose silence, and many died because of it. Eyes shifted in the room, some scribbled, some glanced at me. No one spoke. The air was cold as a weapons vault. I stepped up, carried nothing but a scanned operations order, stamped cease-fire order, not executed. "This is the final order from the command room, signed and time-stamped," I said. It halted the attack before Croft's unit could sweep the target. An officer verified the document. Their eyes for the first time saw me as a witness, not the accused, but I wasn't done. I requested to play a recording from the auxiliary channel. Hold position. Unidentified heat signatures near civilian area. Await verification before proceeding. I repeat, hold position. My voice, 5 years ago. Clear, firm. I looked at Croft. This time his smile was gone. Before the panel adjourned, another voice spoke. "I have additional testimony." Madison stood face pale but resolute. I accessed the device unauthorized. I didn't know its danger, but I take full responsibility for triggering the code. She paused, took a deep breath. My sister covered for me. Not to hide a crime, but to protect me. No one interrupted. No one stopped her. An hour later, I was called to a private command office. The light wasn't as harsh as in the courtroom, but the gazes were still sharp as knives. I heard the official statement, all charges dropped, record reinstated immediately, rank retained, and per recommendation you'll be an honored guest at the upcoming Defense Cybersecurity Conference. I nodded, silently. That night, a draft press release reached my room, General Elena Hart, a new symbol of the digital-era military, a warrior in the shadows. I read it like a stranger reading someone else's story. Every detail was correct, and that's why I knew it couldn't be published. I crossed out the headline, wrote a new one. Some victories don't need recognition. Some people only need to live by their principles. I handed the draft back to the comms officer. Don't publish. I don't need a claim. Just let me keep working in silence. Madison called me after midnight. Few words, just 2. Thank you. I replied with something she could carry for life. Don't live to repay me. Live to forgive yourself. If someone took the blame for you, did you have the courage to stand and own your mistake? Share a silent thank you. I owe you, but I'll repay with trust. The trial ended, but I knew the real battlefield wasn't in legal corridors or military bases. The true battlefield was in every heart that chose to do right, knowing no one would applaud. Some oaths don't need to be carved in stone, just lived. I arrived at Fort Irwin's military airport before dawn. The sky was draped in gray mist, heavy and quiet. No fanfare, no honor guard. Just the distant roar of a C-130's engines and the hurried steps of technicians prepping for an unnamed mission. I carried no name. On paper, this mission had no designated commander. The operative was simply Special Orders Observer. I was used to that. But this morning, something unfamiliar waited. Madison. She stood by a small truck parked near the auxiliary terminal uniform, crisp shoulders square, holding a small object wrapped in military silk. Her eyes were red, not from lack of sleep. "I wasn't sure you'd stop," she said as I approached. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around as if checking if this was a dream. Then I asked, "Why are you here at this hour?" Madison didn't reply with words. She unwrapped the silk. Inside was a silver insignia etched with a phoenix spreading its wings shadow its unofficial emblem. No record acknowledged it, but those who'd held it, passed it, knew its value surpassed any gleaming metal. She offered it to me, but when I moved to decline, she stepped back. No, you've carried it long enough. I don't want to wear it for you. I want to live worthy of it. Those words pierced my heart like a gentle, silent verdict. For years I'd lived as a shadow, thinking my silence was a necessary sacrifice. But maybe part of me was hiding. Hiding from family. Hiding from the past. Hiding from looks that didn't understand. But Madison, the one who once saw me as a failure, stood here not apologizing, not justifying, but choosing to carry forward the ideals I'd refused to claim glory for. I took the insignia, didn't pin it on. I slipped it into my chest pocket near my heart. There, no one needed to see it, but I'd always feel its presence. We stood in silence. No more words needed. Madison broke the quiet with a faint smile. I'll propose rebuilding the cyber warfare training module using the Croft incident as a scenario. It might not be known as real, but at least the next ones will learn from our mistakes. I nodded. Don't let others tell your story. Tell it the right way. When the departure signal sounded, I turned toward the plane. My steps no longer felt heavy. Not because the mission was easier, but because I wasn't walking alone anymore. Someone stayed behind, ready to carry on. And I was ready to leave, not to escape, but to leave something that could grow. If you've ever walked in silence but refused to abandon your ideals, leave a line, I don't need to be remembered, just for the right thing to live on. Because I believe the quietest people are the foundation of what's good. I didn't look back at Madison. I didn't need to. I knew her gaze would stay with me through the journey ahead. The plane's door closed. The ceiling lights blinked green. A technician checked my harness. I nodded. Outside dawn was breaking the first clear light I'd seen after years in the dark. I knew the mission ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time I felt light. Honor doesn't come from being remembered, but from keeping a promise when no one else does. I stepped to the podium at Fort Walker's Hall at exactly 0900, a high-level military conference meant for the brightest names in the system. But today, they invited me. Not to celebrate a victory, not to recount a grand feat, but to talk about silence. Below, over 300 people sat upright, from generals to first-year cadets, from strategists to defense reporters. Cameras blinked red, but I didn't look at them. I looked at the empty space between the rows where I imagined those absent today. Stanton, Reeve, Keller. Those who stood with me in the dark, needing no names. Don't expect a hero's tale, I began, because most of what I've done started with failure. I told them about candor, no names, no locations, just a village in winter, a preemptive strike order, a quiet doubt in the infrared radar. In that frame I said was a shadow, too small to be a combatant. I held the order. I said wait. No medal came for that. No commendation, no press. Just a brief suspension, a frozen file. But 17 names didn't end up on a gravestone. Because I said wait. Because I didn't pull the trigger. I looked down. Some nodded. Some squinted. Some looked away. I didn't blame them. The world's programmed to measure success by applause. But some right actions can only live in silence. In war, we talk of orders, I continued. But sometimes morality lies in the pause between two signals. When I stepped down, no one stood. But no one left. The silence over the room wasn't confusion, it was listening. And then from the front row, Madison stood. No dress uniform, just her daily training gear, simple but sturdy. On her left chest was the silver phoenix insignia worn publicly for the first time. I used to think she said glory was in being known, but after seeing what my sister did, I learned that sometimes those who endure the most choose silence not from fear, but from mercy. When she left the podium, the hall stayed quiet. But I saw the most important thing happen. Someone understood, and maybe a few more would, even if they didn't say my name. After the conference, I was led to a small meeting room. On the table was an envelope with the Defense Department's seal. The head of Special Communications said, We want to formalize the candor operation. Name it, record it, honor it. I asked who gets the honor. He paused, then said softly, "Not all names can stay hidden. Someone has to go on record." I looked at the envelope for a long time, then pushed it back. If shining a light on me means burning someone else, I said, let me stay in the dark. I wrote a letter. No name, no rank. Just an opening line. If the next generation needs a story, let this be it, no storyteller required. I left the letter in the room and walked out of the polished hallway. The afternoon breeze was gentle. I looked up at the sky. No medals needed, no press, no one to remember me. Because I knew I'd lived true to the promise I made. If you've chosen silence to protect what's right, comment, I don't need to be remembered either. Maybe no one will read it, but I will. And I believe you're keeping a promise in silence too. As I left Fort Walker, a ROTC cadet rushed past, eyes glued to her phone. I saw my speech excerpt on her screen. She didn't recognize me, and I didn't need her to. Because true honor doesn't need proof. Just keeping. My story may be done, but what I want to leave behind stays in every word, every silent moment, every choice to do right when no one sees. I share this journey not for applause or to reclaim lost glory. I share it because I believe in each of us. There's a part ready to stand in the dark, keep a promise, and stay silent, so others can live fully. That's mercy. That's courage without a claim. That's honor without a name. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me when you chose to wait instead of chasing the spotlight, or simply write I listened. And if you want to join me in seeking nameless truths, the quiet people who live rightly, follow this channel. Because sometimes one honest story is the only light in the dark. Thank you for listening.